All right, have fun, Laura, Marco says before disappearing into the car. A few seconds later, the crooning chords of Fantasy in C major strike up from the radio, his favorite CD. I sigh, shoulder my back, and march off into the cemetery. Fun, I mutter to myself unhappily as I pick my way around the headstones, watching my step in the dark. Nighttime isn't strictly necessary for necromantic practice, despite the stereotypes, but most of my family has always done it this way. It's tradition. Fun is a day at the beach. Fun is a carousel. I'm a necromancer. Necromancy runs in my family's genes. It's a talent that goes back centuries as far as we can trace it, beyond even Marco, though he remains the oldest active member of our family as of yet. We always give our relatives the choice to rise or rest after death, and oddly enough, most choose to rest rather than return. Marco is an aberration in that regard. Joseph and I, our parents' only children, both bear the responsibility of upholding the family's inheritance through our necromancy. Joseph is a lazy, boorish slab receiving paltry, under-the-table payments for street necromancy as if it's some sort of party trick and not the perfect gift of our heritage. He makes animal bones dance for a cheap laugh, but applies his talent to little else. And I have never raised a single corpse at all. Not for lack of trying. Ever since I was a child, I was obsessed with following in the footsteps of my parents, grandparents, and all my ancestors beyond them. To honor their legacy with my talent would be the greatest boon of all. My efforts have never yielded fruit. It's evident at this point that I've not had the gift of being born a natural necromancer, but any talent can be learned. Contrary to Joseph's belief, libations do not need to be expensive or refined to be effective. Take our cousin Samson's business, for example. He founded his own independent necromancy practice with little more than a few bags of potato chips and a liter of apple cider, and his raising rituals are some of the most infamous in the nation. No, the quality of the libations doesn't matter nearly as much as the intention of the necromancer. So my lack of progress in cultivating my skills must be no one's fault but my own. The penultimate problem with necromancy, which Joseph assumes as a baseline of reality, is that there has never been a recorded case of anyone learning the skill if they are not born with it. It appears to be a strictly genealogical phenomena, unlike nearly every other talent in the world. But I refuse to give up trying. Perhaps my talent is simply latent or dormant, and all I need to do is study and practice the motions until it expresses itself finally. What is not possible is failure. I refuse to entertain the idea that becoming an elemental is the only avenue left for me to take, and Joseph can go drown himself in the sea. When I reach the middle of the cemetery, I choose a headstone at random. The identity of the corpse matters little, and I set down my bag and shovel. This is a free-use cemetery. Will all people buried within it have given their consent to be raised by any necromancer who needs extra bodies for their work? It's an optimal practice ground for me. Unzipping my bag, I produce my libations, a liter of Mountain Dew, several packages of beef jerky, and an old Havdalah spice box I borrowed from one of my Jewish friends for garnish. Other items within the bag include a pair of scissors, a spirit board and planchette, a bottle of spring water, and an ancient cracked hot glue gun. It never pays to be underprepared for a raising ritual. Next is where the shovel will be useful. Bracing my weight against the head of the shovel, I begin to dig out the upper layers of the grave, shuffling the dirt off to the side in as tidy a heap as I can manage. This is the most taxing part and will take me several hours. Luckily, the dirt here is soft and sandy, and the bodies are always buried without coffins and no more than 2 feet deep. 3 hours later, with my arms trembling and sweat trickling down my face, a considerable pile of dirt to my right, I've uncovered the corpse. A woman, interned roughly anywhere between 4 to 6 months ago, primarily skeletal at this stage. There are a few remaining scraps of decomposed flesh clinging to her ribs and the thicker meat of her thighs, but the worms have done their work well. I lay my shovel off to the side, then grab my libations. Intention. Focus. I center myself, breathing evenly, and begin. Bone of my bone, body of my bodies, I offer you drink, I say, uncapping the Mountain Dew and pouring a shot of it over the woman's skeleton. Bone of my bone, body of bodies, I offer you food. I toss the beef sticks into the grave. Bone of my bone, Body of bodies, I offer you stirring senses and bid you rise. I dumped the Havdallah's box's entire contents into the grave. Although the skeleton doesn't so much as twitch, I'm undeterred. I bid you rise, bone of my bone. I bid you rise, body of body. I bid you rise from that deathful rest. Please, I add after a long silent pause, a bit desperately. Nothing. Always. Always nothing. I resist the urge to do something incredibly disrespectful, like throw a rock into the grave, and instead I reluctantly move on to my contingency plan, picking up the spirit board and balancing it on my knees. The practical elements of spirit talking and actual physical necromancy are identical. Both require calling the essence of a person back into the mortal plane, whether this be ethereally or through the pre-existing framework of their bodily remains. One might assume that giving a spirit their body back to anchor them would be the easier endeavor, but nothing can ever go my way. Spirit talking is just so personal. It makes me uncomfortable every time to call them by name instead of just raising their bones. Bones don't have opinions. Bracing my fingers lightly atop the planchette, I read off the tombstone. Marie Castanueva, I bid you rise. From deathful rest, I bid you rise. Bone of my bone, I bid you. Before I can even finish the incantation, the planchette jerks under my fingers, sliding jaggedly over to F. I hold my breath, unable to believe my luck, and eagerly watch the spirit finish spelling out her response. Fuckof. F. My smile fades. What do you mean? I hiss at the board, furious. This is a free-use cemetery. You checked the box in your will that permitted necromantic exploitation. You can't... The planchette skirts to a new letter. B-O-D-Y-O-N-L-Y F-U-C-K-O-F-F. But it's a simple principle. I would only be briefly tying your spirit to the bones for the purpose of reanimation. Marie's spirit moves the planchette to no, then holds it faster, refusing to let me move it any further. After several fruitless seconds of trying to tear the planchette away from her, I let out a short shriek of rage and upend the entire board, throwing the whole thing into the open grave and letting it clatter carelessly onto the bones. Fine. I get to my feet, grab my shovel, and start shoveling grave dirt back over the bones, shaking so hard with anger and disappointment that I can barely hold on to the wooden handle, nearly dropping it more than once. Fine, universe, you win. I'm never going to be a necromancer. It's not like I base my entire life and prospects around this thing. This one thing, it's not like this is a spit in the face of every successful necromancer my family has ever produced. As soon as the grave is filled, I don't bother packing it in or smoothing it over. If Marie Castanueva wanted her grave to look nice, she should have let me reanimate her body. I throw my libations and supplies back into my bag, shoulder my shovel, and stalk back to the truck where Marco was waiting.